The morning sunlight spilled softly across my apartment, brushing against the silk blouse I had carefully chosen. I ran my fingers over the delicate fabric, feeling the subtle comfort it gave me, a small reminder that I had built a life worth protecting. My phone buzzed insistently on the glass coffee table, and I hesitated before picking it up. The name flashing on the screen made my chest tighten. My brother. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since that day. The day he had thrown me out of Dad's funeral, as if my grief wasn't valid, as if I had no right to mourn the man who had shaped both of us. My fingers trembled slightly as I swiped the message open, half expecting some cruel remark, half dreading the pull of the past. Outside my window, the city moved on, unaware of the storms inside me. I could hear the faint hum of traffic, smell the lingering aroma of coffee, and feel the warmth of sunlight on my skin. Mundane things, yet grounding. My mind wandered back to that coffin, the gaping look of anger on my brother's face, and the way the world had seemed to tilt sideways in that moment. But I wasn't that scared, unsure girl anymore. The hurt was still there, yes, sharp and raw, but underneath it, a quiet, simmering strength had taken root. Today, I realized, the past was about to meet the woman I had become. I remember the day as if it were carved into my memory with icy precision. I was 24, still figuring out who I was outside of my family's expectations. Dad had fallen ill suddenly, and we had all rushed to the hospital, my brother leading the way with that familiar sense of entitlement. I thought my presence mattered, that my voice, my grief, my love for him would count. Instead, it didn't. At Dad's funeral, I stood there quietly, tears streaming down my face, trying to honor him. But the moment I stepped toward the casket, my brother's hand shot out, firm and unyielding, stopping me. "You're not welcome here," he said, his voice cold, echoing around the chapel in a way that made everyone look at me. Shock and humiliation tangled with grief, and I stumbled backward, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my purse. The sting of rejection was sharper than any sorrow I had felt before. Grandma had been the first to notice the fear in my eyes. She handed me a small, worn leather journal, the pages filled with her handwriting. "Keep this close, darling," she whispered. "Write your story, not the one they expect. Don't let anyone else decide your worth." That little book became my anchor, the symbol of a life I would carve for myself, one page at a time, far from the dismissive hands that had pushed me away. Walking out that day, leaving the funeral behind, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders, but also something else, a flicker of determination. I vowed to stand on my own, to find a way to thrive, to prove not to them, but to myself, that my existence was valuable. Each step away from that chapel was painful, yet liberating. I was bruised, yes, but in the hollow ache of that rejection, a seed of independence took root. By the time I reached the car, I knew I would never rely on anyone in that family again. Not for approval, not for love, and certainly not for validation. I was stepping into the unknown, carrying only the quiet courage that had begun to stir inside me, and the small, leather-bound promise that my story would eventually be my own. After leaving my family behind, I found myself in a small, dimly lit apartment in downtown Chicago, the city buzzing outside my window. Every night, I spread out the pages of Grandma's journal, letting her words remind me that my worth wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. I worked multiple jobs, coffee shops, reception desks, freelance projects, anything that kept the lights on and allowed me a sliver of independence. The nights were long, often stretching into the early hours, and my body ached from exhaustion, but each small paycheck was a reminder that I was building something entirely my own. Then, one rainy evening, I stumbled into a networking event almost by accident. A woman named Veronica noticed me immediately. Her sharp eyes missed nothing. She was seasoned in the corporate world, confident, intimidating, yet there was a kindness in the way she spoke. "You have potential," she told me, handing me her card. "Don't waste it waiting for anyone else's permission." That single moment became a turning point. Under her mentorship, I learned to navigate business strategy, financial management, and leadership. I stumbled often, tripping over my own self-doubt, but Veronica never let me give up. The first big client I landed felt like winning a war I hadn't even known I was fighting. I remember pacing my tiny apartment, whispering to myself as I confirmed the deal, the rain still dripping from the window pane. My hands shook, not from fear, but exhilaration. The first profitable sale, the first project that I could proudly say was mine, were milestones that no one in my family would ever see on social media. I kept my success hidden from them, posting modest updates or simply choosing silence over pride. The sting of past rejection had taught me discretion. As the years went on, my hidden empire began to take shape. I moved into a loft that overlooked the skyline, decorated it with art I loved, and built a life that reflected my ambitions and values. The memory of my brother's dismissal no longer carried the power to wound me. It fueled me. Each late-night session, each difficult negotiation, each sleepless hour became a testament to my resilience. I had transformed into someone they would barely recognize, confident, financially independent, and unafraid. And yet, I kept that world to myself, the armor I wore not for vanity, but for protection. I had learned the value of earning respect on my own terms, of quietly shaping the narrative of my life. The hurt of that funeral, the sting of exclusion, had become the foundation of my success. In the shadows of my past, I had built a kingdom of my own, unseen but unshakable. And I knew, deep down, the day would come when the people who had dismissed me would be forced to face the woman I had become, stronger, unstoppable, and finally unafraid. The day they arrived, I felt a calm pulse of anticipation rather than nervousness. My office, overlooking the city skyline, was immaculate, each piece of art, each carefully chosen detail, a reflection of the life I had painstakingly built. The leather-bound journals from Grandma still rested on my desk, a quiet reminder of where I had come from. I had invited my family under the pretense of discussing Dad's will, knowing that the truth they expected, of a struggling, dependent woman, would be shattered in moments. My brother was the first to enter, his face tight with a mix of irritation and forced civility. Behind him, distant cousins, aunts, and uncles shuffled hesitantly, eyes darting to the space, as if expecting me to crumble under the weight of my family's judgment. But I didn't crumble. I had rehearsed nothing. My composure came from years of proving myself to no one but myself. "Wow," my brother muttered under his breath, his tone thick with disbelief as he looked around. Expensive modern art adorned the walls. The furniture spoke of quiet sophistication, and yet the room carried warmth, the mark of a life carefully nurtured. He turned his gaze to me, expecting something familiar. Instead, he met a woman who had grown tall, shoulders squared, eyes steady, heart unyielding. I gestured toward the lawyer standing by the desk. "Please, let's begin." The lawyer opened the envelope slowly, savoring the moment, as if he knew the shock would be worth it. "Your father's final will," he said, voice formal, "has been thoroughly reviewed. The estate amounts to $3.7 million, and the allocation may surprise you." Silence fell, the kind that presses against the skin. My brother's jaw tightened, his knuckles white around the arms of his chair. What do you mean?" he stammered. I leaned back slightly, letting the tension stretch before dropping the bomb. "I inherited everything." The room froze. Eyes widened, mouths opened, but no words came. The lawyer's calm confirmation was like a hammer striking reality. My brother's smug assumptions, the casual cruelty of Dad's funeral, the years of disregard, they all dissolved in that one statement. Disbelief painted their faces, shame flickered in my brother's eyes, guilt trembled on the lips of my cousins. I let the silence linger, letting each of them feel the weight of their own expectations, their dismissal, the small injustices they had piled upon me. They had anticipated weakness. Instead, they faced strength. I watched carefully, savoring the moment, not for vengeance, but for acknowledgement. Every late night, every struggle, every quiet triumph had led to this confrontation. I wasn't a charity case or a cautionary tale. I was a woman who had claimed her own story, her own worth. Then I added, with a controlled warmth that made the sting even sharper, "I've built my life from scratch." Every step, every decision, every dollar earned. And today, you see the result of believing in myself when no one else would. Their reactions shifted from disbelief to awe, shame softening into silent admiration. In that room, the power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. The girl they had pushed out of a funeral had returned not just intact, but triumphant, an unshakable force they could no longer ignore. I let the room settle into the hum of stunned silence, watching each face as they processed the truth. My brother, once so certain of his authority, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I realized in that moment that I no longer needed to shout, argue, or justify myself. The power was mine, and how I wielded it would define the rest of our relationships. "I'm willing to help," I began, my voice calm but firm, "but on my terms. The days of entitlement and cruelty end here." I could see the surprise flicker across my family's eyes, like someone had just pulled a curtain to reveal the sunlight. "Each of you has choices to make. Choices that reflect growth, responsibility, and respect." I addressed my brother first. "You will acknowledge the pain you caused, not just to me, but to yourself. You'll seek counseling, confront your past behavior, and learn empathy. If you want any part of this estate, it will come with accountability, not arrogance." His lips pressed into a thin line, shame coloring his expression, but I could see the first flicker of understanding. To my cousins, who had mocked and dismissed me for years, I laid out a challenge. Pursue your dreams rather than riding the coattails of others' success. No more blind judgment. No more toxic comparisons. Use this moment to redefine yourselves. For my aunts and uncles who had passively allowed cruelty to thrive, I said, learn to listen. Support without judgment. Respect without expectation. Simple words, yet they carried the weight of years of lessons I had earned the hard way. I watched them absorb it all, realizing that my compassion didn't undermine my authority. I could care and still command respect. I could offer a chance for growth while standing firmly in my own value. This was no longer about revenge. It was about rewriting patterns, about setting boundaries that demanded dignity from both sides. And then I looked around, making eye contact with each person, letting them feel the power shift. "I built my life when no one else believed I could," I said softly. "And now, I'm offering you the opportunity to rise, not because I owe you, but because I choose to extend grace." The room was quiet, the weight of my words sinking in. For the first time, I saw something shift in them, a subtle softening, a willingness to reflect, perhaps even a desire to change. And in that moment, I understood the truth. Power without compassion was hollow, but power exercised with clarity and integrity could transform not just me, but everyone around me. The legacy of Dad's wealth had become secondary to the legacy of strength, resilience, and moral courage I had cultivated. And for the first time in years, I felt complete, not because they had acknowledged me, but because I had stood tall, unwavering, and unafraid. Weeks passed after the confrontation, and slowly, subtly, I began to notice changes. My brother attended therapy sessions, no longer lashing out but learning to listen. Cousins who had once sneered at my choices now asked for advice on pursuing their own dreams. Even the distant aunts and uncles softened, learning to engage without judgment, to offer support instead of criticism. It wasn't instant perfection, but it was progress, and I let myself feel quietly proud. I often returned to my loft in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the city in gold and rose. The journals Grandma had given me rested on my desk, open to pages filled with scribbled reflections, reminders of the girl I had been, the woman I had become. I touched the leather cover gently, a smile playing at my lips. Her words had been a lifeline, a compass guiding me through grief, rejection, and self-doubt. Now, they felt like a bridge connecting the past to the present, proof that resilience can blossom from even the deepest pain. Sitting in the calm of my home, I allowed myself a rare moment of introspection. I thought about how far I had come, from the trembling girl at Dad's funeral to the woman standing tall, commanding respect and creating her own destiny. The hurt had not vanished, but it had transformed into strength. The rejection I once feared had become the soil in which my independence had grown, untouchable and flourishing. And then, as I looked at the skyline, I whispered the truth I had carried quietly for years. I was enough. I was powerful. I was free. Not because anyone had recognized it, but because I had recognized it in myself. I closed the journal, the leather smooth under my fingers, and stood by the window. The city hummed beneath me, a reminder that life moved forward, that opportunities awaited, and that nothing could diminish the woman I had fought so hard to become. I had healed, I had grown, and I had chosen the relationships, values, and boundaries that truly mattered. With a deep, steady breath, I allowed myself a final reflection. Pain had taught me courage, rejection had taught me resilience, and my journey had taught me power. The story of that day, of that funeral, of the $3.7 million was no longer about money or revenge. It was about claiming my life, my voice, and my worth. And as I turned from the window, a quiet, confident smile graced my face. "My name is Emily Carter," I said softly, letting it settle in the room, in the air, in myself. A name that now carried strength, grace, and the promise of everything I had fought to become.